Hello there. I'd like to buy a copy of Resident Evil Outbreak. Did you pre-order a copy? Oh, no. Man, you're lucky. We only have one last copy. I hope you don't mind, it's the display copy. You should really pre-order if you plan on shopping here more often. Okay. By the way, would you like to pick up the strategy guide while you're here? Nah, not today. Maybe if I get stuck or something, I'll come back and pick it up. Well, no, that's a shame. But if that's your choice, what do you mean? Well, if you buy the guide and the game at the same time, you get 10% off the guide. 10% off the guide? Oh, I'm in. A wise choice, my friend. Yeah, I know. I was swindled. But I was young. What can I say? Most of the guides, actually, that I got were in situations like that. And honestly, it was kind of normal. Especially considering how crappy internet walkthroughs were back in the day. Back in the mid-90s, I was introduced to Game Sages. It was the website to go to for cheat codes. And with Game Facts, you would find the occasional great walkthrough. Shoutouts to CVX Freak. But for the most part, the guides were still in their infancy. Which led to me getting those strategy guides. I've decided it's been a long time coming. And I think it's time that I go back and revisit my memories from strategy guides. From the ones way back in the early years to the ones I got in the later years. But before we get to the later years, we have to start in the early years. So let's go back to a time when me and my friends couldn't figure out how to get to that alternate boss battle in Star Fox 64. And we had to turn to some paper backup. Get it? Paper backup? Because it's like backup to help me accomplish my task, but it's also, most of the guides were paper backup. Let's move on. Back in the day, there were all sorts of guides, both official and unofficial, or unauthorized, as my old Star Fox 64 guide said, from many different companies. The ones we'll be focusing on today came from Prima and Brandy Games, but I also own some from so many other publications. Before we jump into those guides, I had a few memories from guides I don't own anymore that I still think about. When Parasite Eve came out, I bought the guide for it the same day that I bought the game. I knew it was a Square RPG, and those were always bonkers in terms of difficulty for me. I played the game's introduction, and the next day my parents and I all went on a vacation. And I had to leave behind my precious PlayStation. I ended up bringing the guide to Parasite Eve, and anytime I had a moment to browse through it, I would look through it like it was a sacred scroll of wisdom. I literally went through the whole guide during the trip and was salivating at the different things I was going to do in Parasite Eve. When we got home, I pretty much knew what to do in the game because of all the reading I had done on vacation. It was like I had done my homework right before a big test or something. Another guide story I wanted to share was from my PSM MGS2 issue. Basically, when Metal Gear Solid 2 was about to come out, PSM, the unofficial PlayStation magazine, which later became the official PlayStation magazine after the first official PlayStation magazine got cancelled, but then PSM ended up getting cancelled too, released an entire guide on how to beat the game. What was amazing though was since the issue came out slightly before the game, the entire guide contained no spoilers and very few screenshots. They never showed Raiden, and anytime they had to show a screenshot from a Raiden part of the game, they would always do it from a first-person perspective, so you'd only see his hands holding a weapon. I also remember how ambiguous the description on how to beat Solidus was. I remember reading it and thinking it was an underwater boss battle or something. I actually found some of my old guides in my storage closet and started reading through them. They all have many similarities. For one thing, posters were bonuses in almost all of them. I actually put up the Resident Evil Remake and Zero posters back in the day. Maps were also featured often and would totally give you a better lay of the land in case the game in question was confusing this. This was nifty to have in a pinch. Sealed sections were curious. It was essentially a mini pamphlet that was sealed with a perforated edge so that you wouldn't get easily spoiled. Seems like a bit much in my opinion, but whatever, I guess. Character guides and timelines were always in the older guides as well. Sometimes they would feature some really interesting tidbits of information that I didn't know about, which always enhances the game you're playing. Concept art was a favorite feature of mine, whenever it appears. I've always appreciated looking at ideas that could have been, that ultimately weren't. Hell, sometimes the developers would go back and use discarded ideas from an old game for a new one. I'd be one of the first to be like, aha! As I got older, walkthroughs online got better and better. In fact, video walkthroughs, such as the ones you can find on YouTube, started popping up, and it was kind of silly to buy an actual paper walkthrough of any kind. Though, there was a couple of times that I would get it for, special reasons. These were usually hardback and were for games that I was a huge fan of. Well, let's take a look at some of those. One of my favorite memories from the later bot guides was a guide I didn't even buy. While I was working at GameStop, we were at the eve of the release of Metal Gear Solid 4. MGS4 was the whole reason I bought a PlayStation 3, and we were like a week away from release. I made it very clear to my coworkers how big a fan of the MGS series I was. So one day, they told me to go in the back and check out what was in the new shipment box. It was the MGS4 guides. They weren't sealed and could be read, and during my lunch break, I grabbed one and read the shit out of it. I remember getting spoiled about a few things, not anything major, and it made my anticipation that much more higher. Now, onto the guides I actually bought. Most of them were hardcover and were made to look like a collector's premium type of thing, as if to say, do you like this game? Buy this fucking guide. My Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker guide is a bit weird looking though. It's small, which is great since it was for a PSP game and makes it more portable, but the entire thing is sideways. It's so awkward. Also, it's spiral bound, which to me makes it a bit less awkward that it's sideways, but still weird all the same. Metal Gear Rise's guide has a forward. This was the first time I ever saw something like this in a guide. It also has an extras section, which is pretty well done. Also included is written commentary from the writer of Metal Gear Rising on some of the story choices made in the game. Speaking of Metal Gear, let's take a look at the last guide I bought, The Phantom Pain. It's a masterpiece. First off, it has a wonderful foreword from Hideo Kojima. Knowing that this is his last Metal Gear title really makes all the words in this foreword ring true. There's also a commentary on all the characters, which is a fascinating insight into MGS5. In the back of the book, there's a major timeline / summation of the entire Metal Gear Saga lore that comprehensively ties everything together, and even adds new details and connective tissue between the games. It's a wonderful part of the guide that, alone, is worth the purchase. All in all, these later guides are basically premium / collector's versions of what the old guides used to be. The writers and publishers of these guides stepped up and made what amounts to the love child of old guides and art or memento books. And those are pretty much my thoughts. I'm probably forgetting something, or maybe there's stuff I just wasn't aware of or something like that, and who knows, maybe we'll do another episode in the future that'll cover that. But for now, this is pretty much my definitive take on good old-fashioned paper strategy guides. And it's kind of interesting if we really look at the history of these sort of things. even before paper strategy guides, there was the Nintendo Hotline. And then eventually they got to doing paper walkthroughs and, strategy guides and all that stuff. Then online walkthroughs happened. They were a lot more interactive and things of that nature. Then video walkthroughs happened, and it was even a lot easier. Because sometimes you read stuff and you're like, I don't understand what they're describing here, or it's something that's hard to describe. The video ones came out, you could just see as plain as day what you're supposed to do. So I'm kind of curious what's going to happen next. I know the Wii kind of experimented with the game taking over for you if you couldn't get past a certain part. And I know some games have like a skip feature. If you can't fight a boss or something, you can skip it and proceed with the game. So, who knows what the future will hold. But anyway, that's all I got to say for now, guys. So always remember, Retrospectives be damned, I'm telling my story.